Welcome to Makery Pokery. Today we're going to make these beautiful cherry shadow boxes for these awesome collages. We're going to use finger or box joints and make neat little retainer clips for the glass with magnets in it. This project started, as always, with plenty of figuring. Once I worked out everything, I cut the pieces and then milled the wood square. This is a fun process. I started at the joiner, making one side of the wood flat by first covering it in pencil marks and then passing it over the large spinning blades until all the pencil was gone. Then, after making sure the fence on the jointer was square to the table, I repeated the process for one of the edges, making sure to keep the side I just milled pressed firmly against the fence. This way I get two flat sides and one square corner, which I use as reference faces for everything else going forward. Next, I fed the boards through the thickness planer with the reference side down. This mills the side facing up and makes the two faces parallel. Again, I use pencil marks to ensure that the whole surface gets milled. Also, it's really fun to watch the pencil slowly disappear. I also use the thickness planer to do what it's named for, namely make the wood the thickness I need. So now I had a board that was square on 3 of its 6 sides. I took it to the table saw and squared up the ends, cutting the boards to the size I need. Then I broke out the box joint jig. I loaded up the dado stack on the saw, set up the jig, and cut the fingers for my joints. I made a couple of mistakes here that ended up costing me a lot of time later. First, and worst, I forgot to put in a new backer board, which meant I had a lot of tear out that I had to deal with. This is the backer board. Where the blade meets it, you always want to start with a fresh piece so that the cut is backed up. This prevents tear out. I also made the fingers a little bit too long, which meant an extra step when gluing up. I cut the final edge, making all the boards the same size. Then I laid them out in the way they were going to be assembled and marked where I wanted to cut the rabbits and the dados. Now it was time to use the router table to make the slots for the glass and the back of the frame. I set up stops to do this, otherwise there would have been holes in the outside of the completed box. I used my handy setup blocks to set my square and the fence. A quick test cut showed me I was good to go. I did the slots in 2 passes, raising the router bit in between and using my square to make sure the height was correct. Now I dry fit the parts together and labeled each board at the corners. Then I marked where the radius of the router bit had left a little bit of wood. A chisel made quick work out of these. Then I cut the top off the bottom edge of the shadow box. I need a way to get the plexiglass in and out in case it breaks or scratches. I swear, it was square when I clamped it and dry fit it. And as soon as the glue went on, it got all difficult and annoying. This sometimes happens, and you don't have to take it. I didn't. I ran to the table saw and made a few of these quick and dirty corner clamping blocks out of whatever this is, it was just in the scrap pile, and I gently persuaded it to behave. I love unclamping. It's like Christmas morning and square. A bit of cleanup on the belt sander for my very ugly corners. Now I needed to make the retainer for the plexiglass. I didn't have any more strips large enough to do the job, so I made one. Once that was dry, I unclamped and removed the dry glue with a hand plane. Pretty. I used double stick tape to attach this piece to the box, carefully cutting the strip to give myself some extra room along the edges. This way, when I sand the thing, it will all line up perfectly. By the way, if you don't have double stick tape in your toolkit, you're missing out. It is really super useful. I cut the back panel out of some 1/4-inch plywood. The tear out along the outside of the box was looking much worse than I had thought, and it was deep enough that I was pretty sure if I tried to sand it off, the box would end up being lopsided and bad. I decided to use the table saw to remove a very thin piece from the edge, about the same size as the blade's curve. I set up a sacrificial fence and set the blade to be slightly lower than the full height of the box, and then I used that top part as a reference edge to stay safely against the fence. I forgot to turn on the camera. So here is a dramatic reenactment. You'll notice no more tear out. Plenty of burning, but that'll sand right off. A quick pass with a flush cut bit on the part that ran against the fence and did not get cut off, and we're good to go. Finishing time. I sanded the out of it. going from 80 to 120 to 220. Then I used some Danish oil. For the back piece, I used some dark walnut colored oil just for fun, even though it's kind of pointless since no one will ever see it. For the rest, I just used the natural color. Now that the shadow box frame was ready to go, my friend brought over the backer board, which she had glued her amazing collage to, and we put it all together. I used this cool point shooter thing and some framer's points to hold it in firmly. I also put in some D-rings with rivets so that it can be hung. Then I peeled the protective film off the acrylite, which is the brand name of a plexiglass we're using, slid it home, snapped on the retainer, and we were good. Except... wah wah. The plexiglass we purchased had an anti-glare coating on it, and on a deep frame like this, it ends up making it look kind of blurry. We got some perfectly clear plastic, and it looks a lot better. Voila. On the first one I made, you can see some tear out in the corners, and you can see the joint for the glass retainer is just a bit more visible than I'd like. On the second one, however, there's no tear out, and that line is almost invisible. I did not set router stops for this piece, so there's little holes here, but no one will ever see them. I'm really happy with the second one. As Adam Savage says, if you want it to turn out perfect, make more than one. That's not a direct quote. I hope you enjoyed this project. Thanks for watching. Please consider hitting the like button and maybe even subscribe.